uh, where Solomon talks about the fact that that which is crooked cannot be made straight. He said that there are some things that happen in life that are crooked, and that these things can never be made straight. And so, you look at when a young person loses their life, at 19 years of age, and they had most of their life ahead of them. And, you ask the question, even going back to what Solomon said, something crooked that happened, and for that young man, how can that ever be made straight? He lost the majority of his life that he had ahead of him. And so how can that be made straight? And so Solomon, even though he takes us into the depths of despair often, he does bring out some things about life that causes you to think. And this is one of those things that causes you to think that some things that are crooked can never be made straight. And so that's why, even as we look at the Ecclesiastes, and we look at how life without God is just as he says, vanity and chasing after the wind. But when you bring God into the equation, you come to the realization that God is going to make sense out of it, right? So under the sun, when we look at crooked things that can't be made straight, it makes no sense to us, and we are left in despair. But when we bring God into the equation, you have to realize that somewhere God has worked this thing out. God has straightened things out. I don't know how. I don't know that he does it. I'm just saying that you put it in his hands, and you say, God, you have all power, and you have all wisdom, and so you can work things out according to your honor and glory. So we continue to trust him. And we look at life without God, and when you see life without God, it's just not very very edifying. Okay, let me do this. Okay, so can you see that, Naomi?
Yes.
Okay, so we're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So again, we look at the overview of the book of Ecclesiastes, and you see on the left-hand side, there's three perspectives of Ecclesiastes. And we find all three of these in Ecclesiastes. Now, some people would want to tell you that these that one perspective might dominate the whole book, right? But I think that we find these three perspectives in this book. We find the fatalistic perspective, and that is, there's nothing to be gained in this life. Whatever is going to be is going to be, right? All is vanity and vexation of spirit. And then there's the humanistic perspective, where Solomon is giving his point of view, and he says that enjoy this life because this is it, right? So when you look at the humanistic perspective and the fatalistic perspective, you see that that deals with life under the sun, right? 29 times in the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon uses the phrase under the sun. So he's talking about life under the sun. And so if you look at that little sun up there, and you see life under the sun, and we'll look at this in a second. It's just an endless cycle of events. There's an inability to do anything permanent, no lasting enjoyment in this life. In the end, all die. No one has any advantage. And then our twilight years are plagued with evil. So life under the sun, it just, it ends up emptiness, chasing the wind, things in the world, no love for the Father, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, and all these things will be consumed one day, and in the end, it'll all be ashes. But what is Solomon trying to do? He's trying to get us to get a perspective above the sun, right? He's trying to get us to look above the sun, and that's the theistic perspective. And that is, a life lived without God is worthless in eternity. It means nothing in eternity. A life lived without God. You know, you think a person, they live their life, they die, and if they didn't know God, you know, they step off into a godless eternity, and you know, their life is worthless at that point. So, man, praise God. If you got God in your life, if you've accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, man, you got the right perspective. You got the right perspective on life. And so we see this in the book of Ecclesiastes. There's a threefold division of Ecclesiastes. Solomon deals with a dilemma, right? And he begins by declaring the dilemma, that there's no profit in things under the sun. Then he delineates the dilemma, and we just talked about that. You know, all that's under the sun. Life is an endless cycle of events. There's the inability to do anything permanent, no lasting enjoyment in things. You know, everybody dies. No one has the advantage. Again, life under the sun. And the twilight years are plagued with evil. However, in the end, he deciphers the dilemma and says, when you fear God and keep his commandments, then that's when life takes on meaning. So today, we're going to try to cover 2 lessons today. I'm going to try to get through the book of Ecclesiastes in 6 weeks. That's my goal, is to get through it in 6 weeks. And this is our 3rd week. So we are in Ecclesiastes chapter 4 today, and we'll be in chapters 4 and chapters 5. But Ecclesiastes, and you have the notes. So if you have the notes, you can follow along with the notes also. But in chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, we see, he says, then I returned and I saw another vanity under the sun. Okay. So where's he talking about? Where's his focus? His focus is where? Under the sun. Under the sun. He said, when I looked in this life, he said, I saw another vanity, right? Another form of emptiness. And what was that? He said, there is one alone, and there is not a second. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother. As some people used to say, he had chick nor child, right? He has neither child nor brother. Yet is there no end to all of his labor. He still worked, right? He still worked. His eye was not satisfied with riches. He wanted to get more and more. Neither said he, for whom do I labor, and my bereaved soul of good. This is also vanity. Yea, it is sore travail. So the vanity that he sees here is being alone. Notice what he says. He said, the vanity that I saw under the sun is that there is one that is alone, and there is not a second. All right. So, you know, you remember that song. Some of you might remember the song, All by Myself. All by myself. I don't want to be all by myself. And so that's what Solomon is addressing this afternoon. That person that's all by themselves. Now, there was a song, and some of you may remember this song, by Marvin Gaye. Kim Weston sang along with him. And you know what? This song captures this passage that we're going to be studying this afternoon. You know, we're talking about songs in the key of life, right? And Marvin Gaye, you know, sang this song, It Takes Two. And that's what Solomon is presenting to us this afternoon. Let me just read this real quick. Verse 9. Solomon, after he talks about another vanity, and he talks about being alone, all by myself. Notice the next words that he says. The very next word that he says, 2 are better than 1, right? 2 are better than 1. And then we have this song, It Takes Two. Some of y'all might, when I share with you the words, you might get your groove back on, right? I might see you. Well, I don't have your pictures on my screen, but some of y'all might get your heads bopping, right? When we look at the words, right? It takes two, and saints, this song captures this passage that we're getting ready to study. it captures this passage. So it says, one can have a dream, two can make that dream so real. One can talk about being in love, two can say how it feels. It takes two. Oh no, let me stop. Let me stop. All right. One can wish upon a star, two can make that wish come true. One can stand alone in the dark, two can make the light shine through. It takes two. All right. One can go out to a movie looking for a special treat. Two can make that single movie something really kind of sweet. Yeah, one can walk in the moonlight thinking that's really nice, but two walking hand in hand is like adding just a pinch of spice. I should have had the music right to play. It takes two. So look at it. I mean, it takes two. You know, Marvin Gaye hit the nail on the head with this song, or whoever wrote this song. Let me see if they put on here who wrote it. William Stevenson and S. Moy evidently wrote this song, right? So they hit the nail on the head when they wrote this song for Marvin Gaye. It takes two. All right. So Solomon talks about the isolation of being alone, right? It takes two, right? But notice what he says in verses 7 and 8. He says there's no time to develop relationships, right? He said there is one alone and there is not a second. So what happened to this person? This person didn't take time to develop any relationships. They just isolated themselves and they were alone. Notice what else this person did. This person worked incessantly. Solomon said in verses 7 and 8, there was no end to their labor. They just worked and worked and worked and accumulated a bunch of wealth. And it's just like somebody said, when the rich man died, how much did he leave? He left it all. He left it all. So this person worked incessantly and had no one to share it with. Notice that the person was greedy, that the person spent their life working and in greed. It says, neither is his eye satisfied with riches. So he just wanted more and more. And then guess when he stopped and he looked around, he said that there was no one. Solomon said there was no one to share it with, right? He said, for whom do I labor? You know, who am I going to leave all this to? So this guy didn't know the reality of the song that Marvin Gaye sang. He didn't realize that it takes two, right? He didn't take time to develop relationships. He worked incessantly. He was greedy. And in the end, he had no one to share his labor with. And then I began to do some research. And why do people isolate, right? Solomon today is going to talk about the value of companionship. And why do people isolate? Well, the internet, right? You know, you can stay in your house. Think about this and never have to interact with anyone, right? I mean, just think, that's the way our society is. You can stay in your house and never have to interact with anyone. You can have people, you can go online, not talk to anybody, order your groceries, right? You can go online, order whatever you want. If you want deodorant, if you want hair products, you go online and order it, right? On Amazon. You don't have to deal with anybody, right? You say, man, these folks done wore me out. I don't feel like dealing with people. And you can just stop dealing with people and not have to worry about communicating with anybody. You know, automobiles, you know, there was a time when, you know, people walked together, they went together, they rode the bus together, they interacted with. Now, you know, you get in your car and go to where you want to go, right? Electronic games. More and more people are spending individual time with these games and less interaction. You know, I really been thinking about the games that some of these young people play, where it's just a bunch of shoot 'em up. You know, where you were shooting people, you were shooting real people, or people that look real, in these video games. and you're watching the bullet hit them. You're watching their body explode. You're watching blood fly everywhere, right? And I think that's a lot. That's having a great influence on our young people. You know, the fact that you can just go shoot somebody and not even give it a second thought. You know, just take somebody's life. And I think that these games, you know, have a lot to do with it. You know, it's like I told my grandson, he comes over to our house quite a bit. And I told him, I said, look, man, I don't know what I don't know what you do but there's not going to be any games over here with any shooting, where you're shooting people. I said, there's not going to be any games where you're shooting people. And he said, well, Pop, then what about this paint game? You know, they got a paint game. I said, well, let me see it. Right. But I said, no, there's not going to be any of these violent video games where you get on here and shoot people. Right. Because you become desensitized to that. And so people get wrapped up in these games, and, you know, they don't have interaction with other people. Look at a lot of these people that go into these schools or go into these malls or movie theaters and shoot people up. A lot of them spent time in isolation, right? They spent a lot of time in isolation, and then they just went out and wreaked havoc on society. Fear. People are afraid of being known and being rejected by others. So what do? They isolate. Some people have been hurt. They've been wounded, and they isolate themselves. Some people don't feel comfortable around others. You know, they're shy, introvert, backslidden, intimidated, and they isolate because they don't feel comfortable around other people. Some people have pride. You know, they believe that they don't need anybody else. I can do whatever I want to do. I don't need other people. But, you know, when you think about it, now think about this, saints. Let me hit this last one. Private person. You don't want anybody to know your business, right? And so these are reasons that people isolate. But let me throw this out at you. When God, how come, look at this. How come God didn't create Adam and Eve at the same time? He could have very well done that, right? He could have very well created Adam and Eve at the same time. But he created Adam. And then what did he say when he created Adam? It is not good that the man should be alone. Marvin Gaye, it takes two, right? He said it's not good that man should be alone. God created us for companionship, right? So whatever reason a person has for isolation, it's not, I think we can say this, it's not the will of God. It's not the will of God for you to isolate, because that's not why God created you. You know, let me back up. There is the story of a lady who isolated, and she didn't, you know, she just stayed to herself, and then she died, and they wanted to put her obituary in the newspaper, but they couldn't find anything about her, and so they got frustrated and they gave it to the sports writer, and they asked him to write something to put it into the obituary, and this is what he put: "Here lies the bones of Nancy Jones. For her life held no terrors. She lived by herself and died by herself. No hits, no runs, and no errors." Right? So that was the sports editor. That's what he came up with. But here's the life of a person that isolated, right? The life of a person that isolated. Look at this. Have you ever heard the song Eleanor Rigby? Right? That whole song is about isolation. You know, I think, look at that second line. Father Mackenzie writing the words of a sermon that no one will hear. No one comes near. You know, so that might be Pastor Glaze writing the words to a sermon that people show up on Sunday morning, but no, I'm just, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All right. Look at him working, darning his socks in the night. There's nobody there. What does he care? Now look at this. To me, this is so sad. Eleanor Rigby died in the church and was buried along with her name. Nobody came. Father Mackenzie wiping the dirt from his hands as he walks from the grave. No one was saved. All the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong? We live in a world of isolation. And this song is a perfect example of isolation. Some of you may have heard of the song by Simon and Garfunkel, "I'm a Rock." And so this is the person who intentionally isolates, right? Notice what the words of this song says. "I am a rock, I am an island. I have my books and my poetry to protect me. I am shielded in my armor, deep within my room, safe within my womb. I touch no one." Look at this isolation. "I touch no one, and no one touches me. I am a rock, I am an island." And look why he does this, right? Why does he isolate? A rock feels no pain, right? That, as a rock, if you're not in relationships, you're not going to be touched by, the infirmities of others, your infirmities. A rock feels no pain, and an island never cries. This guy says, as long as I'm isolated, I'm not going to feel any pain, and I'm not going to cry. So we live in a society of isolation. Is it any wonder that when Solomon looked under the sun, that one of the things that he saw was somebody that was alone? All right. Here goes Howard Hughes, right? This guy had everything, but he ended up isolating, right? And when he isolated, notice what it says here. He concluded his life, and I'm down toward the bottom. There's a lot of words up top, but I'm down toward the bottom. He concluded his life emaciated, colorless, sunken chest, fingernails in grotesque, inches-long corkscrews, rotting, black teeth, tumors, innumerable needle marks from his drug addiction. Howard Hughes died believing the myth of more. He died a billionaire, junkie, insane by all reasonable standards. This guy died alone, right? Somebody said he had guards outside of his door that guarded him, but he died alone. And so here is the results of somebody that dies alone. So what are the benefits of companionship? Notice what Solomon says in verse 9 of chapter 4. There's productivity in the time of labor. He says, two are better than one because they have good reward for their labor, right? Notice that these individuals, the first benefit is that they have good reward for their labor. So this can be taken in two ways. The good reward can be, and I talk about this in your notes, sweet fellowship, right? That when you work, oh my goodness, sometimes now I know I run the risk of somebody saying that this, Pastor Glaze, what you're saying is not true all the time. And I agree, this is not true all the time. But just think about when, because some people just like to work by themselves, and they work better by themselves, they get more done by themselves. But a lot of times, if you have somebody working along with you, isn't the job a little bit easier? Like I said, unless you got a knucklehead who's just slowing you down, right? When you're working with someone, the job is, you have the sweet fellowship. And not only that, but you have increased productivity, that you can get more done when you work along with someone else. So, he says here, two are better than one, and they have, now notice, they have great reward for their labor. So what is the great reward? The great reward is the sweet fellowship and the increased productivity. The benefits of companionship, productivity in the time of labor. Here goes a little poem that I wrote. And I'm at some point I've written about 100 poems, and one day I'm going to publish these poems. Maybe after I die, one of my kids or grandkids will publish it, and I'll become famous when I'm in heaven. I don't know. But here's a little poem that I wrote. Two are better than one because they can get a lot more done. And if by chance one should fall, there was someone present on whom to call. Another thing that is really neat if two lie together, they can both have heat. And when the word of division by the enemy is spoken, a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So that's my attempt. Somebody said you a poet and you know it, and your big feet show it. So Longfellow. No, just kidding. All right. So two are better than one, and Solomon brings that out. Notice the types of companionship. When he talks about two, there's husbands and wives. There's close friends. I didn't put the scriptures with the rest of this. There's mentee and mentor and mentee. There's discipleship relationship. People have prayer partners. So you can't be like that Simon and Garfunkel song. I am a rock. I am an island. You can't be like that. You got to open up your life, and you got to allow people to come into your life. Now, again, you just can't let anybody and everybody in, but there should be special people. There should be special relationships that you have. So these are some, and these are the ones that I just thought of. You could probably think of some more, some types of companionship that people have. There's, even I didn't put this in there, but relatives. Sometimes your brother or your sister, might be your best friend. So I need to put that one in there too. So there's, but what is the point? The point is that we need to be in relationship, right? We need to be in relationship. I know over the years, I've had fellowship with pastors, that we've met on a regular basis. I have a group of guys that I meet with, and we, listen to music. We fellowship. We go to concerts together, right? So this is, and that's the beauty of the church, saints. That's the beauty of the church, that you have a family that you should be able to connect with on some level and have this companionship. Because again, remember, Solomon said two are better than one. The benefits of companionship: there's help in the time of difficulty. Notice what he says here: for if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falls, for he hath not another to help him up. So all of us at some point, are going to fall. Solomon uses the example here of people traveling along the roadside. And if they were walking with another person and they fell, there's someone there to pick them up. They don't need a handout. They need a hand up, right? And so we've all seen the commercial, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. What's this person's main problem when they fall? What's their main, I know they got all these little devices where you can, get in contact with the EMS and EMTs and all them other individuals. I understand that. But when this person falls, what's their problem? There's nobody there to help them, right? There's nobody there to help them. Thank God that, the emergency rescue squads will be there, hopefully in not too long of a time. But at that moment that you fall, there's nobody there to help you up. And so that's the benefits of companionship: help in a time of difficulty. So it's just not falling, but it's when you go through difficult situations that you have somebody there, that you can call on, that can pray with you, that can encourage you, that can reach a hand down in whatever you're going through, to try to help you up. All right. Help in the time of difficulty. Benefits of companionship: comfort in the time of need. Notice what it says here. Again, if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? Right? So you have comfort in the time of need. One of the groups that I used to listen to back in the day was 3 Dog Night. Some of y'all might have heard of that group. 3 Dog Night. They sang that song, Jeremiah was a bullfrog, joy to the world. How can people be so heartless? I mean, they had a bunch of hits, right? And I just stumbled across, how did they get the name 3 Dog Night? And they said, I guess some of them were in colder regions, and whenever it got cold, they would sleep with a dog next to them, and it might be a 1-dog night, right? And they said, but when it got real cold, that was a 3-dog night. And so that's why they would put these 3 dogs around them to keep them warm. And so that's where they got their name, 3-dog night. So I just every time I think of this passage right here, where it says if 2 lie together, then they have heat, but how can one be warm alone, right? So sometimes we might need a 3-dog night, right? And what is that? Comfort in the time of need. That when we have needs in our life, that we would find comfort during those times of need. Benefits of companionship: protection in the time of danger. And if one prevail against him, 2 shall withstand him. A 3-fold cord is not quickly broken. So if you've got companionship, you have what? Protection in the time of danger, right? That's what Solomon is letting us know. Somebody that got your back. I like that little stick diagram right there. The person on the right was worried. They feel that they're out there. They've been left vulnerable. And the other person on the left said, hey, don't worry. I got your back. I got your back. And so sometimes, saints, we just need a person that has our back. And Solomon concludes this by saying that a 3-fold cord is not quickly broken. A 3-fold cord is a powerful union. 3 strands of a cord are each separate unity. As they stand isolated and alone, they are in a weakened state. However, when the strands are twisted together, they represent a strong unit that cannot be easily broken. A 3-fold cord is not quickly broken. So Solomon started this passage off by saying, I saw a vanity under the sun. And what was the vanity? He said there was a person that was alone and there was not a second person with him. And then he went on to tell us why it's important to establish relationships and the benefits of relationships. So we look at life under the sun, 4 things real quick, and then I'm going to get into the other lesson that we're going to cover today, life under the sun. So you guys, if you have questions about that, make sure you write them down. So at the end, you can ask your question if you have anything that or anything you want to say about the benefit of companionship. Life under the sun, not under the S-U-N, but under the S-O-N, right? Take time to develop meaningful relationships. Thank God or thank the Lord for the meaningful relationships he has given to you. So now, see, I go through this rather quickly, but you have all these notes and you have all this stuff that maybe not some of these PowerPoint illustrations, but the main things that you have. Exercise the one another's in the New Testament. Love one another, serve one another, encourage one another. That deals with that companionship. And realize that there are dangers in being isolated. The Bible says that the devil goes around like a roaring lion, seeking who he can devour. And I think a lot of times he devours people that are isolated. They've isolated. When you think about a herd of zebras, if you ever watch these National Geographic shows, right, where they got these zebras that travel in herds, and what do the lions try to do? The lions try to isolate, get one separated from the herd, right? And when they get them separated from the herd, that's when that lion pounces on them. So realize that there's danger in being isolated. All right, let me move on to the next thing. You've heard of the song, and if you look at your note, These Eyes, right? Junior Walker and the All-Stars. I think the Who also sang it. But in your notes, the song These Eyes, and I'm reading from the notes right now, was originally a song by Canadian rock group the Guess Who. It was written by Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings in 1968. Junior Walker, what does it take to win your love for me? That's the question that I asked my wife when I first saw her, right? What does it take to win your love for me? That brings back memories. This song, okay, not Junior Walker and the All-Stars, you know, what does it take to win your love? But Junior Walker sang These Eyes, right? This song is a lament from a man who was in a committed relationship in which vows were taken, and the love of his life left him, right? In the song, he uses his eyes to describe how he had been touched by this relationship. These eyes cry every night for you. These eyes watch you bring my world to an end. These eyes have seen a lot of loves, but they're never going to see another one like I had with you. And throughout the song, he reminds this young lady, he says, you gave a promise to me and you broke it, and you broke it. He said, you took a vow with me. He said, you spoke it, and you broke it, and you broke it. In Ecclesiastes 5, 1-8, Solomon describes another evil that he's seen under the sun. Watch this. And that is people who make vows to God and don't keep them, right? This young lady made a vow to this young man that she was probably going to be with him forever. He said, you took the vow and you spoke it. He said, you made a promise and you broke it. And so Solomon says that there are people under the sun who have made vows to God and haven't kept them. First of all, he begins, because generally, where do you make a vow at? I mean, generally. Now, you could say, well, I make it in my bedroom, or I make it in my... No, generally, when you make a vow to God, is usually associated with the house of God, you know, with going to the house of God. And notice what he says here in verse 5, chapter 5 and verse 1. He said, keep your foot when you go to the house of God, right? And be more ready to hear than to give sacrifice of fools, for they consider not that they do evil. All right. So, you know, he says here that when you go to the house of God, because again, this is the place, you know, when you go down to the altar, Lord, you know, I commit to be usher. Lord, I commit to be singing the choir. Lord, I commit to witnessing the people in my neighborhood, on my job. So generally, again, what do you do? So he says, when you come to the house of God, enter with a reverent spirit, you know, a respectful spirit. And he says, be quick to hear and slow to speak. So, you know, before you open your mouth and say that you're going to do something, commit to do something, he said, be quick to hear and slow to speak. So he said, you got to have the right attitude when you come to the house of God. And if you come to the house of God with the right attitude, then that will keep you from probably making a vow that you can't keep. You know, what's that old expression? Don't let your mouth make a bill that, and I'm not going to say the word, but that your body can't keep, right? don't let your mouth make a bill that your body can't keep. All right. So he says that you got to have the proper attitude when going to the house of God. And so he says in verse 2, he said, be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thy heart be hasty to utter anything before God. You know, and then again in verse let me see here, in verse 3-5, and especially he says, when you vow, look at verse 4, when you vow a vow. So he's talking about vows here. So when we think about vows, what is a vow? You know, so, you know, again, it might have meant something a little different back in Solomon's day. I'm trying to bring it to where we are today. A vow is a serious pledge or oath that obligates an individual to carry out certain duties or fulfill the responsibilities of a specific agreement with God. That's what a vow is a pledge or oath that you give and tell God that you're going to do something. All right. Now, how do Christians make vows? Christians and vows. They promise to do something for the Lord, right? The believer should make promises and commitments to do things for the Lord. That's true. All right. Since vows were made after careful consideration, we should earnestly seek the Lord to see what commitments we should make before him. So before you make a vow, you should seek the Lord. That's why he said, watch your steps when you come to the house of God, that you should earnestly seek the Lord to see what commitments that he wants you to make. And then when we make commitments to do things for the Lord, we should not be slack in fulfilling them. If you said that you're going to serve the Lord, that you're going to do something for the Lord, and then you start half-stepping, you start shucking and jiving, that leads us to the thing that God is not pleased. God is not pleased if you make a commitment. We want to see that here in a second. If you make a commitment and you don't keep it. And then there are some conditional vows that we should make. We should say, Lord, if you help me to do such and such, I will do this. And then there were unconditional vows, and that is, Lord, help me to do this. So a conditional vow would be, Lord, we used to have faith promise at our church, right? So, Lord, if you provide $25 extra a month, I will give that to faith promise, right? That's a conditional vow. There's unconditional vows where it says, Lord, it says, Lord, I feel very strongly that I want to serve you as an usher. So, Lord, help me to commit to serve you as an usher. So that would be an unconditional vow. Conditional vows would be the Lord does something and then you do something. Unconditional vows, you do it regardless of what the Lord does. All right. So just keep in mind as we go through it, these are vows that Christians can make. So the first thing that he says is, don't be rash in making a vow. Don't be rash. And rash means don't hurry up. Don't rush to make a vow. He says in verse 2, be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thy heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Let your words be few. So you really need to think about what you want to do, and don't run off at the mouth and say that you're going to do something, right? You really need to think about it. So the next thing, don't be a fool and make a vow and not pay it. All right. Don't be a fool and make a vow and not pay it. Look what he says in verses 3 through 5. He said, for a dream cometh through a multitude of busyness, and a fool's voice is known by the multitude of his words, right? He just runs off at the mouth. When you vow and vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay that which you have vowed. Better it is that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay it. All right. So Solomon said that you're acting like a fool if you vow to do something and you don't pay it. Realize that it is a sin to break a vow. Realize that it is a sin to break a vow. Verse 6, suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. Well, how can you sin? By making a vow and breaking it. Neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Why should God be angry at thy voice and destroy the work of thy hands? All right. So realize it is a sin to break a vow, and then weigh your words carefully before making a vow. For in the multitude of dreams and many words, there are many vanities, but fear God. He said, don't let your words be vanity. Don't let your words be empty by saying something that you're going to do and then you don't do it. He said, fear God and keep things in perspective. So I made it through 2 lessons this afternoon. The first lesson, it takes 2. The second lesson, these eyes, breaking vows. So hopefully you've written down your questions, or you've noted them in your mind. And so I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to hear from you at this time.